Hi, I'm Edwin Alvarez. I'm a GYN oncologist here at UC San Francisco. Also the director for our clinical trials program. Please excuse it if I look like I'm on vacation because I'm on vacation. I apologize, I can't be there in person to come give you this talk, but hopefully this will make do. So today's talk is GYN oncology clinical trials at UCSF. Brief outline. So we'll do a little bit of a background and review for some definitions to get everybody up to speed. Hopefully answer some questions folks might have about clinical trials. We're going to talk about the goals of our program, our team, how to find a clinical trial at UCSF. We'll talk about some of the trials of note, including both open trials as well as ones in the pipeline. And then we'll talk about some conclusions. So for background and review, basically the things we'll talk about FDA approvals, phases of trials. We'll talk about the role of the placebo, and then funding source of clinical trials. So the whole clinical trial mechanism exists in order to have patients get drugs that are safe and effective. In order to start a trial, we have to have biological reasoning that is sound. The idea is that we have discoveries in the bench, basically in research, that can be taken to patients and then hopefully taken back to the bench if things don't work out as expected, so that things can get better for the next iteration. Safety and efficacy must be proven. We need preclinical evidence that a drug would work and that it's safe. There must be a safety designed into these trials. There has to be sound statistical designs, or there have to be sound statistical designs in order to tell us if differences that are seen are actually valid scientifically. Historical context is important. And then there needs to be placebo-controlled trials at some point in order to prove that the new drugs are actually effective. So what are our phases of trials? You may have heard of phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. Most recently in the news with the vaccine trials for the COVID-19 vaccines. You may have heard this quite a bit. So phase 1 is when a drug company has a drug, or a university or somebody who wants to take a drug to market. It's the first in human trials, either of the drug or in the combination. And the main outcome that you're looking for here are the dose and safety. You want to know what dose to move forward, and you want to know what the safety is of the drug, what kind of complications you might have, side effects and toxicities, how are those managed. And you usually have some idea of what these things are going to be before you go into trials based on the preclinical testing or lab-based testing. Phase 2 is where we say, okay, well, phase 1 gave us an idea of the dose. It gave us an idea of the safety. Just go back to phase 1. We do usually have some idea of how these drugs work, so that we'll target certain tumor types for different phase 1 trials based on information we have. So you will get some level of evidence that drugs work, but it's really just a taste. Phase 2 then really is, okay, well, let's get 50, 60, 100 patients together, same type of cancer, and let's see how well this works. This is really what we call then efficacy trials. We then, if those are positive trials, then go to phase 3, where we test standard of care against the new experimental drug or an experimental combination. This is where we use the placebo-controlled trials. Of note, phase 1, 2, and 3 they're not strict definitions. There are subgroups. There's phase 1B, there's phase 2As. So these are not strict categories, but they do pretty well to explain how we think about moving drugs from the lab to patients. So what's the role then of placebo? We get this question a lot when folks are referred for the very first time considering a clinical trial. Placebos are in many phase 3 trials, and they're in some phase 2 trials. Design might be placebo plus the standard of care versus an experimental agent or drug plus the standard of care. Rarely in GynOnc or in cancer trials do we have placebos alone. Having a placebo gives us confidence about the differences between the groups in efficacy. We do placebo-controlled trials because the placebo effect is a measurable and strong effect. So importantly, people who enroll in trials will always know if there's a chance that they're going to get a placebo. This is not something that you sign up and you have no idea there. Maybe there's a placebo, maybe there's not a placebo. You'll know what the chance is. You'll know if there's a placebo in this trial. You'll know if it's 50% chance that you get one, if it's 30% chance if you get one, for example. Those are pretty common numbers that we'll see for placebos. You can look for trials if there are some people who are just totally against the idea of a placebo. But there are some people who may wish never to have one, so there are trials that are specifically designed without placebos, and those are usually the phase 1 and phase 2 trials. So how do we pay for our trials? So there's sources of funding. The government is a large source of funding for trials through the NCI, and this NCI is a National Cancer Institute, which is a branch of the National Institutes of Health. Industry is another way of providing funding for clinical trials, and this can be direct from a pharmaceutical company or through a hybrid approach. So basically, like a foundation of consisting of various research universities that get together, but they have trials that are funded by pharmaceutical companies. So one example of that would be a GOG Foundation, for which we have a number of trials, or the Alliance Foundation trials. There are others as well. Foundations are also sources of funding for trials. Philanthropy plays a role here. One of the best examples would be the Parker Institute, which funds a number of immunotherapy trials here at UC San Francisco, but not in our group at this time. This takes us to the goals of our clinical trial program. Why do we do this? Why do we have a trial program? What's the benefit here? So we have options for patients, and that's really the most important piece. I'm going to pause this for just a second. So we want to give our patients options. Patients might want to try the newest and best drugs that are coming out of research laboratories, and may want to try them in the upfront setting, saying, "Hey, we already know historically what these do. Is there something better for me?" We may have patients who say, "Hey, we've done everything that's kind of standard of care. What are there other options? Things that I can hope for to help extend life." We want to have a balanced portfolio to fit the needs of our patient population. So it wouldn't make sense to have a bunch of trials for drugs, or for drugs for patients, for tumors, that we don't see. And we have to balance our funding sources. You have to have some industry and hybrid trials in order to support the scientific collaboration that you want to have. Or set up the administrative framework for investigator-initiated trials. So by having this framework for investigator-initiated trials, then we can then directly contribute to the science, not just as a team member, but by actually asking the scientific questions ourselves. So our team on the clinical research coordinator side, we have 3 wonderful CRCs, Natalie Haley, Victoria Onyike, and Catalina Penn. We just lost our protocol manager, who was Catherine. Some of you may have met her before or heard of her. Our interim protocol manager right now is Natalie Haley, and we are very excited to have her. She's doing a fantastic job. So how do we find G1 oncology clinical trials at UCSF? The best way is to use this link, www.ucsftrials.com. It's an interactive portal. You can type in type of cancer, the subtype, the stage, the prior treatments, and it'll spit out a list of trials across UCSF that would be useful for you, which you can inquire. It'll also give the contact information of the people, for example, the CRCs would be running that trial. There are 3 ways to get into clinical trials at UCSF for G1 oncology. So our group is the predominant way to do that, and we have phase 2 and phase 3 trials and some phase 1. There's the phase 1 or experimental therapeutics group. They run large phase 1 trials, early drug trials for many types of cancers, not just ovarian, not just the GYN, but all solid tumors, for example. And then there'll be some of their trials will have arms or cohorts for GynOncology patients. And then there's the CIP program, or the Cancer Immunotherapy Program. They have a number of interesting trials right now. Actually have some cell therapies that are very interesting for ovarian cancer. I'm not going to talk about those trials because I don't run those. I'm not that involved aside from the collaborative pieces. So trials of note in GynOncology, these are the trials that we're enrolling currently. We have right now a bit of a dearth. We're kind of on a downslope on the number of trials that we have open. And this happens, they come and they go. We just recently had a number of ovarian cancer trials closed due to fulfilling enrollment or because they were deemed to be not active, actually, which is a risk. And so these are the current trials we have. We have GOG 3059, which is a placebo versus paclitaxel with AVB S6 500 in patients with platinum-resistant ovarian or recurrent ovarian cancer. Platinum-resistant recurrent ovarian cancer. The study chair for this is actually our own Dr. Fu. This is her trial that came out of her lab, or work that came out of her lab. We have NRG, and so that GOG comes from the GOG Foundation, which is that public-private hybrid that I mentioned earlier. On the CRC for that is Catalina. We have NRG GY019, which is through the mechanism, the CTEP mechanism, the cooperative group, NRG. CRC for this is Victoria. This is an ovarian cancer trial for primary low-grade serous carcinoma using either primary carboplatin Taxol with maintenance letrozole versus just letrozole alone, which is a aromatase inhibitor. So basically using the hormonal manipulation for treatment of low-grade serous ovarian cancers versus chemotherapy is a very exciting trial. We have GOG 3026. The CRC for this is Catalina. This is another ovarian, low-grade serous ovarian cancer trial using ribociclib plus letrozole. Ribociclib has found a great use in breast cancer as a CDK4/6 inhibitor in combination also with aromatase inhibitor for further hormonal treatment of a recurrent low-grade serous ovarian cancer. NRG CC008. This is not a treatment or chemotherapy trial. This is actually a surgery trial comparing the non-inferiority of salpingectomy to salpingoophorectomy. So removal of the tubes versus tubes and ovaries to reduce the risk of ovarian cancer among women with high risk of ovarian cancer or BRCA1 carriers. This is the SOROC trial. Natalie is our CRC for that trial, and we've been very successful in enrolling on this trial. Dr. Chen is the study chair here at UCSF, or site PI. NRG GY018 is an endometrial trial. This is using pembrolizumab plus paclitaxel and carboplatin for recurrent stage 3, 4A, or 4B endometrial cancer. The CRC for that is Natalie. So we have a number of trials in pipeline. These are the kind of the most important trials that we have in our pipeline. The top two, the one on ovarian and one on the endometrial side, were both actually either written by or in collaboration with Dr. Lin Lu, who works at GynOnc, but is one of our partners and a long-term friend. She has been responsible for pushing these and designing these trials. So Bouquet on the left, that's GOG 3051. This is a study evaluating the efficacy and safety of biomarker-driven therapies in patients with persistent or recurrent rare epithelial and ovarian tumors. This trial has about 10 arms using a bunch of different drugs that are all directed by next-generation sequencing, which can really give kind of a personalized therapy for these rare ovarian tumors that have been very difficult to treat and have not been as maybe easy to treat as some of the other more common ovarian cancers with chemotherapy. We do estimate that opens mid-October and hopefully even sooner. Going down on the ovarian list, this is CORT, is our Rosella trial. This is relacorilant, which is a glucocorticoid inhibitor in combination with nab-paclitaxel. versus investigator's choice in advanced platinum-resistant high-grade epithelial ovarian primary peritoneal or fallopian tube cancer. And that'll be opening also quite soon. NRG GY027, also Dr. Fu, Catherine Fu is also, it's also her trial. She is the study chair. This is an ovarian phase 1 and 1B safety and pharmacodynamic study of neoadjuvant paclitaxel and carboplatin with ipatasertib as the initial therapy of ovarian cancer. Ipatasertib is a PI3Kca inhibitor, which targets a mutation that's frequently seen in ovarian cancer. Over on the endometrial side, we have AFT50 or the EndoMap trial. I happen to be study a chair for one of the arms of this trial. This is a targeted agents with atezolizumab for recurrent or persistent endometrial cancer. Anticipated activation also is mid-October. We're very excited about this trial where we're starting to finally treat endometrial cancers as not one monolithic entity. We use all the same chemotherapy, but we're trying different personalized treatments based on mutations that are found. And then we have GOG 3065, which is a Zentalis trial drug. This is a WEE1 inhibitor for the phase 2 trial for recurrent uterine serous carcinoma. We're very excited about this, and hopefully this gives us some new treatment options. Also in our pipeline, a number of the trials mostly for ovarian cancer, because that's our kind of number one group that we serve for both clinically as well as that we're able to offer clinical trials for or enroll to. SL03 is a Shattuck Labs drug, excuse me, which is a bispecific antibody against SIRP alpha and CD40L, administered with either pegylated doxorubicin or mirvetuximab soravtansine. I said that wrong. In patients with platinum-resistant ovarian cancers. Zentalis, or GOG 3067, is also again the WEE1 inhibitor in combination with niraparib for ovarian cancer. We have a University of Alabama investigator-initiated trial, which is an upfront chemotherapy with or without mirvetuximab and ovarian cancer. We have OPAL, which is another umbrella study, multiple arms that will open over time. And this is also looking at upfront treatment. And this the first arm to open will be actually using PARP inhibitors in the front line rather than chemotherapy entirely, which is quite exciting for ovarian cancer. And then we have a Trillium study, which is another phase 1 and 2 study of another antibody that targets CD40 using also pegylated liposomal doxorubicin for platinum-resistant ovarian cancer. We have a number of other trials in our pipeline that are much earlier, but doesn't really make sense to talk about them because those trials frequently don't open. We see that there is some attrition. So conclusions. I present here some background and definitions for your reference. This is also as a reference for how to get to clinical trials at UCSF, both through the different groups that offer clinical trials, but also through the online portal through UCSFtrials.com. And my recommendation here for folks who may be considering clinical trials is to check trial availability. Use the link, plug in, see what you got. Or by follow-up appointments when they're needed. So when somebody's basically having a recurrence or a risk for recurrence, and then there may be a time to ask for a follow-up visit by one of these GynOncology providers to see what trials are available. I do just want to reinforce that our trials are constantly changing. So what's available today is not, it's not the same as what's going to be 6 months down the road. So please do look. And thank you so much. I hope this answers some questions, and hopefully our CRCs who are here will be able to answer some of these questions, and look forward to talking to you all or some of your folks at some point about some of our clinical trials. Again, thanks for joining, and have a wonderful rest of your symposium.